This video is showing you how to sketch in freehand isometric. You've got 4 shapes that you need to sketch in the boxes provided. Think carefully about space and proportion so that they don't go outside of the box. In order to sketch these in isometric, you normally would use a set square to get the angles correct. For this, because it's freehand, you will not be able to use a ruler or a set square. I'm going to zoom in on one of the boxes to show you how you would draw the first shape. So we're going to now draw this shape here. So you can see we've got a box with a lid that's open and then the drawer coming from the side. So in order to draw that, first thing I need to do is get roughly the angles of the isometric. So I'm just going to draw a very light line going from each corner to create a cross in the middle. Now, even though this might not be accurate to the measurements of a freehand isometric sketch, it will get you the proportions correct. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the basic part of the box. Now remember, with isometric you have 3 sets of lines. You have your vertical lines, you have the lines that run diagonal from bottom left up to top right, and then from bottom right up to top left. So all the lines you draw must be parallel with either one of those 3 lines. So I'm going to draw a box first. So I'm going to start with my vertical. I'm pressing very lightly. I've got the angle here, so I'm just going to continue that down, and then I'm going to draw in my vertical, again drawing very lightly. Again, I've got the angle there, so I can now draw going up, come down vertically. Now I can draw in the top part of the box. Again, look very carefully at the angles. You can see I use my pencil by looking at the line first to get the angle right with my hand. Then I sketch that line on. So I've drawn the box shape. However, you can see my box is quite shallow in height, and when you compare it to the one in the diagram, it's a little bit taller. So I'm going to need to extend that a little bit. So I'm going to actually bring that down a little bit more and draw that again, remembering the angles of the lines. So we've got 3 sets of parallel lines. I've now got drawn that in. I can draw in the lid, so the lid is obviously just going straight up, so I can just continue this line going up. Obviously I don't want to go past the line of the box, so I'm going to keep it there. I've probably drawn that just a little bit too big because the proportion of the lid's not quite right, so you will need to think carefully about how you draw this. And then we've got the inside of the box. Now the inside of the box doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. There's obviously a shelf here because we've got a drawer, so I only need that to go part way. Again, double checking angles of lines at all times. And then I've got that part. Now I can draw my drawer. Now the drawer doesn't touch the very bottom of the line, so I need to draw the opening first. So I'm going to draw a rectangle roughly about there, which shows where the opening would be. My drawer is then going to come from that, so again keeping the angles of the lines correct, and then verticals, again drawing very sketchy lines to begin with. And then I've got the rough shape. Now to neaten this up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a coloured pencil to highlight the lines that I want to focus on. So again, we're not using a ruler, so just ever so carefully and neatly going to go over all of the outlines that you've got to show the shape. So at this point it doesn't matter if you've got more than one guideline there for a specific line. The whole idea of guidelines are they're there to guide you. So if you've got a few more, as long as you press nice and lightly, they won't be prominent on the page. So try and keep it as neat as possible, but this is freehand isometric, so they're meant to be very quick. The whole idea of these is that when you sketch ideas and you need to get them down very quickly, you can convey your idea in 3D, but you're not having to take forever using a set square getting the angles absolutely spot on and worrying about your lines being perfectly straight. But the whole idea of isometric is that you have 3 sets of parallel lines. So you can see I've got all the verticals are all pretty much the same. The angles going up from bottom left to bottom top right, and then the same in the opposite direction. So that's how we've done that shape. The second shape we've got is this one. So this shape is actually, it's a rectangle box, but the lid is the same height all the way across, but the base is actually shorter on one side than it is the other. So it's got this slight diagonal going up to create this triangular sort of effect. So to start with that one, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a rectangle first. So again, I'm going to draw my lines going roughly from corner to corner, pressing very, very lightly. Remember, your guidelines just need to be visible. You don't want them prominent on your page. So I started a little bit too high with this one, which meant I couldn't go fully off the page. So with this one, I'm going to come a little bit further down, and I'm going to start with this line here because I can get that nearer to the bottom of the space. So I'm going to probably go back here. Now, the rectangle I'll draw first is going to be the height of this part because it's the tallest part of the box. So I'm going to make the rectangle quite tall. Again, look at my lines, really. You can see I'm very, very sketchy with it. I haven't got my pencil on the page for one full line. I'm sketching them, getting angles, altering as I go. So I've gone a little bit too long there because it's a bit shorter in length than it is, sorry, width than it is length. And then you draw. Okay, so this angle here we can see is slightly off to this one. So all I'm going to do is just slightly amend that. And again, you can do that because you're sketching very lightly with your pencil. So that's my basic rectangle. So what you can see here is that the base bit here is a lot shorter than the top bit. So therefore what I'm going to do is I'm going to take from there and I'm going to draw a line all the way up to the top, and that gives me that angled side. Obviously this part here needs to continue. And then to get the back, I'm going to draw the whole bit of the base, even though you can't see it because the lid's hiding it. I'm going to copy that in. So now I've got the whole side. I can draw in the inside of, so I've got the base part there ready to go. Now it's really important you don't rub these lines out because these are going to help you with the lid. So if you see the lid is actually slightly further above where the top of this line is. So I'm just going to continue this line going up. Same on the one at the back. So all 4 lines I'm going to continue up. So now I'm ignoring this line and I'm focusing on this diagonal. So I'm going to take from this point here and I'm actually going to continue that line up to that point. Match it up on all 4. So I've already got it there drawn for me. I'm going to now draw that bit in. So that is now the lid. So all I need to do is make that slightly thicker. So we need a slight gap between the lid and the base. Really pay attention. Sometimes it can get a little confusing with your guidelines, which is why when you draw on your lines with your coloring pencil, you really pay attention. So I'm going to start with the top because the lid is the main part that you see and it hides the base. So that's the easiest part to start with. So I know the lid is going to go back along this line, come down, up and across. And that has now made that top part. I can then do the depth of the lid by coming down and matching that up. So I've got the lid drawn in. Obviously I've now got the angled part. So this is where it's going to be angled. So I'm coming up across my line, come down. Really take your time to make sure that your lines, it's pointless drawing all your guidelines in, taking your time to get the angles correct and then going too quickly when you draw it all in and go wrong. And then remember the little lines going backwards. Remember the lid is completely solid, so that's going to hide a lot of those lines for you. I've probably done mine a little bit too close with the lid. It could have been doing it a little bit higher up so I could see a little bit more detail on the inside, but it still gets across the idea of the shape. Our next shape is going to be this one. So it's very similar to the one above. We haven't got to angle the side, but what we have got to do is curve off to the edges to make them more of a rounded shape. So we're going to start in the exact same way. So we're going to have a rectangle. So we're going to draw our lines going from corner to corner, very faintly. And we are going to draw a rectangle. So I'm going to start with my vertical. Use the angles of the lines. Okay, it's pointless drawing these sort of cross shape in if you then ignore what you've got there already in front of you. It's there to help you get the proportions and the angles correct. If you draw those on and then don't pay attention to them, can't guarantee that your angles are going to be right. So you can see I always use my pencil, get the movement in my hand first to get the angle right, and then I draw that in. Again, it's very, very sketchy, not pressing hard on the page at all. So now that I've got a rectangle, this is obviously was a rectangle, but it's been curved off. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to curve this off. So I'm going to take probably almost halfway, so almost look halfway, and do a little dot, and then I'm going to just ever so carefully curve that off. Then I'm going to do the same, so I'm going to come down, down, and then you're again trying to keep the proportion of that circle as you go. Remember, it needs to stay the same thickness. You don't want it to dip in the middle. It needs to get the same thickness all the way around. Then we now need to do the one furthest away from us. So same proportions. So we're going to roughly look halfway, halfway, and again, going to curve this off a little bit. So we've got that curved shape. Now, if you actually look at the angles of these curves, they're a little bit further out than what I've done. So I might need to just alter these slightly. Again, where these are guidelines, that's fine. I can actually draw over. And then when I come to do my coloured pencil outline, I can just go over the ones that I know I need. So that's the curved shape. Now obviously the lid is above, so we're going to use the same technique as the previous one. We're going to continue our lines ever so carefully going up. We're going to draw, this is going to be the base of the lid, so obviously we need a gap between the lid and the base part. So obviously this now comes to the curve, so I need to look carefully at how that curve's going to match. So again, you're looking to keep the proportion of that gap going round, and then match this up and keep your curve going again as you go round. So that's the base of the lid. So now all we need to do is make it thicker. So again, using these areas here, I'm going to make this slightly thicker. Always pressing lightly. Okay, if I press too hard, it's going to be too prominent, and then when I draw in the lines, if I've gone wrong, it's not going to match up perfectly. Key thing though is remembering which ones are which. So now I've got all those guidelines, I can take my pencil and draw in the shape. And again, start with the lid, because that's the part you see majority of. The part underneath is hidden because of the lid. So I'm going to draw my lid on first. So I've got my straight line coming back, straight line, and then it's going to curve off ever so slightly. Then we've got the depth to the lid, which I'm going to draw in. Depth to the lid. And now I can draw the tray. So obviously we've got a gap between the lid and the tray. Make sure your coloured pencil is nice and sharp, that way you get a really nice clean line. If it's blunt, you're going to get quite a thick line, and it's not going to make the shape stand out as well. So just take your time drawing in the shape, and then obviously we've got the inside bits to show the thickness of the underneath, and therefore we've then got that shape. The last one is slightly trickier. So this shape here is this star shape. Now it might look quite impossible to draw an isometric, but we're going to take it in two parts. So I'm going to draw my lines on in the background. Now if you think of this shape as two triangles, so we've got a triangle for this part and then a triangle for that part. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to draw two triangles for this part. And we're actually going to draw the lid first. We're going to come in reverse. So this part of the triangle here is going to be a slightly different angle to this because of the shape it is. So this point here to this point here is actually your isometric line. So you can see here, so if you use that as your guideline to get the angle correct. So I'm going to use my pencil to get that angle correct, and then I'm going to draw a line for the triangle. Now obviously this point of the triangle is halfway, so I'm going to find the halfway point, come out, and I'm going to draw that triangle in. I'm then going to draw the opposite triangle, and again you can see this line is the matching with this line. So I'm going to draw an opposite triangle. This one is quite tricky. It does take me a little while of trying to get it right. It is one of those shapes that is quite a difficult one to do. So it's just about giving it a go, seeing how well you manage to do. Now obviously looking at this, these all look quite good, but this one here looks quite small compared. So I'm just going to mend the angle of these lines slightly so that I've got slightly longer proportion there. Okay, so now I've got that part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into the lid. So the bit you can see is the top of the lid. The lid has a little bit of a thickness. So I'm going to draw down vertically a little way from each of these points at the front. And then I'm going to draw the lines in to match up the shape. So don't worry if it's not exactly like this one. It's the concept. So obviously here you can see this slight side. Mine is going to be a little bit difficult to do that one. Now this one here goes all the way down. I think you're going to find you're going to need to draw in the top part like so. So that's got our lid. Now I'm actually going to draw this in the coloured pencil first, because this is going to make it easier for me to see how to turn it into the rest of the shape. So I'm actually going to draw the lid on first so that I can see with what I'm doing. So just ever so carefully draw those lines down. Remember, you don't need to go all the way across because that was just there to give you a guidance to get the shape. Then I'm going to come down, make sure these lines are parallel with the ones above. Make sure your verticals are nice and vertical. There we go. So that's the lid of the shape. Now to create the underneath part, all we're going to do is take these lines and very carefully go straight down. Almost as if it looks like the star's turning into a shooting star. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come down slightly further and draw our lines back in. Now obviously this one here, try and keep the thicknesses and the angles correct the whole way along. Okay, now obviously you can't see this bit so far, so we're going to leave that there, And then we've obviously got the angle of that one here. Then we can add in our thickness. So we can add in the thickness of the shape to create the base part. Again, keeping, and then this one obviously needs to go backwards, as does that one. And then what we do is we just go back over with our pencil, highlighting those key lines that we want to focus on. See this bit, I need to look at the angle of this line here, so this actually goes back at that angle. Then I can add in my verticals and join them all up. Really take time with getting them to look like the shape, but the whole idea of freehand isometric is that it shouldn't take too long. And that is then the star. And what you should have by the end of that task is 4 quick isometric sketches showing those shapes. You can still see all the guidelines visible. This is really important in order to get your high marks, especially in an exam. They will want to see the use of guidelines, how you've worked out at getting the angles correct. So never rub out your guidelines, never rub, same as in maths, you never rub out your working out. You don't rub out your guidelines in graphics. So give that a go, give it a practice, and then in lesson, you can do the proper assessment. Good luck.